right, I am here with Yochai Gal. I hope I got that all right. I was uh, talking about a Cairn, which I think I'm also pronouncing correctly, which I should because it's kind of an English word, and even that one. It's funny with RPGs. So I'm someone. We were talking off before the stream started. I went to high school in Morocco, and It's always been something I try to get people's names correctly. My last name is Terwilliger. It gets people want to pronounce it wrong all the time. Um, and plus my grandmother had one of those weird American experiences where she was Polish, but then apparently when she was in, I guess, elementary school, her name was like Balbina, and kids just started calling her Irene. And so she became Irene, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized her real name wasn't Irene, and it was just one of those weird things. I always try to get people's names. So hopefully I wasn't too far off. I did get a practice. I can't say I came to a blind because I got a couple of practice shots before we get live. Hey, Elfbait, welcome in the chat. So I guess first things first, how did you fall into, or what is your, how'd you get into the kind of the RPG, OSR sort of zine space?
Well, first, thanks for having me on.
Sure. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
So, yeah, and I appreciate the attempts to say my name correctly. Cairn is Welsh, not English, or
It's, thank you.
But no, I mean it. Well, actually, it might even.
It's
Welsh
I think
and Irish.
in Irish too.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think they each have their own ways of saying that. Maybe it is originally Irish. I don't actually remember now. It might be like Scotch Irish, which is just Irish. Anyways, so yeah, my name is Yochai. I got into the zine scene, if you want to call it that, actually before I was into the OSR. Was your original question, how did they get into the OSR or how did they get into the zine scene?
I guess both, however you want to, either one.
Sure.
Like, how did you get into kind of OSRs, or
yeah, well,
give
me
your
kind of like RPG backstory, if that helps.
Yeah, totally. Actually that's probably would have much more a better way of putting it than I did.
No. I mean, those two targets are helpful. They're helpful. So I started playing role-playing games originally in the 90s. I started with Palladium 2nd edition, and Palladium Fantasy 2e is what it was. Was like, I think I got it from a used bookstore or something in like 1999 or 98, something like that. And that had a huge impact on me. But then I stopped playing for like 15 years after that, and maybe a little bit longer. Then a friend of mine got into a pretty bad hit and run, and like he was hit by a car, and he was fine, but he couldn't walk for like 6 months. And I knew he really liked, I knew he liked Pathfinder and 3rd edition, but I did not want to play those. And so 5th edition had just come out like a year before, and so I went and got the 5th edition DMG and a bunch of other related stuff and learned how to run 5th edition, so I could run games for him. And in fact, I did for quite some time, like twice a week or something with a game group. At some point, I discovered sort of the indie scene. I was aware of the OSR scene specifically, and I'm using indie here to mean both like the DIY RPG scene as well as the more kind of weirder story game and like PBTA stuff. I kind of fell into that all at once. I actually discovered Dungeon World was the first big non-traditional RPG I'd ever run, and I mean, there's a lot I learned from it. I don't touch PBTA stuff at all anymore, but for a while that was a pretty big deal to me. The Dungeon World scene and PBTA in general. I actually wrote a game called One Shot World, which is a version of Dungeon World for playing one shots. And for like 2 years, I would run a one shot with strangers every Saturday at my office. My work had a really nice office. Yeah, so I played I think I ran like 200 games with like complete strangers I met online, like on Meetup, and that taught me a lot of stuff. One of the things that it taught me was that I don't like being told how to play as much as Powered by the Apocalypse games like to tell you how to play. That's what they do. They're really, I mean, yes, they're considered rules light in some cases, but to me, a lot of the structures and frameworks kind of reinforce this is how you should play this genre, and that's fine. It does a really good job at doing that, but at some point I figured out I really liked problem solving, exploration, outside of the box, like creative, critical thinking, that sort of stuff, as well as lethality in games. It was really important to me that death was on the table, that the players and player characters had something to lose, because that's what sort of pushes them forward to make decisions carefully. So figuring that whole mix of elements out took me a while, like up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And then when I figured out what I liked, it was pretty straightforward to get into the OSR scene, which is, that those things kind of come along with most OSR games.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's probably
answer?
like the main checklist, I think, of things that people appreciate about the OSR generally, right? Is the engine player, like whatever they'll call it, player skill, ingenuity, whatever, that idea of sort of solving problems using your brain and imagination, and the high lethality, and yeah, you can kind of do kind of whatever you want. You're sort of kind of wide open. And then, so you went from that and running all those games, and so before you even got to Cairn, you'd already done One Shot World. So
Mhm.
having gotten, and the other thing that's nice that probably most people don't get to do, well, I would say almost everyone, no one gets to do, but you were able to develop the kind of what you wanted through getting all those kind of repetitions of playing and running games. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to run 200 games. You're going to get to that point where you kind of have a really good understanding of, these are the things I really like, and these are the things I really don't ever want to do again. And, being able to really separate that, which I think can be, I've talked about in other videos, I think it can be very hard for people, especially newer people to the scene, is kind
To
of what you
know.
think,
Yeah.
to know what you want. Because sometimes you think you want something,
Yes.
but the
Yes.
reality is you don't want it.
Right.
Or even
Yeah.
that kind of miscommunication, like someone responds to the meetup ad for a sandbox game, but their understanding of what a sandbox game is different from, maybe what it really is, or maybe it's romantic to them, but then when they actually get into playing it, they're like, yeah, this isn't for me. Getting to run 200 games, I mean, you're gonna, hopefully at the end of running 200 games, if you don't have a good idea about what you like or what
Right.
you don't like, then something's probably gone horribly wrong. So from that experience, how did you get to deciding, hey, I'm gonna throw a zine, whatever they call it out there?
I honestly called it zines for a long time. English was not my first language, and so I have a lot of made up pronunciations for things, and you will catch them as we talk. And please feel free to correct me. But as far as I know, it's
I think it's
pronounced
zine
zine.
from magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yes,
I always
that's
just
what I've
see it on
heard.
its own so much that I just see it as zine. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
supposed
know.
to be
I'm
like
in the
short for
same way.
magazine.
Um, well, so also while I was running those one shots, I was also running. This is before I had a kid, of course. I was also running my 5th edition game at the same time every week. So I had like a 5th edition group, and then I had my random meetup group every Saturday. Um, and they both taught me different things. Eventually, what I learned is that I really didn't like rules, and the games that didn't have a lot of rules. Let me back up. I didn't like having high crunch, a lot of mental bandwidth, especially for someone who struggles with math. Like, I really can't hold a lot of numbers in my head, and modifiers and to hit rolls and um, proficiency bonuses. All that stuff was just a huge drain for me. I would feel very um, tired after a lot of games. With Dungeon World, I felt much more open to hacking it, probably because it's Creative Commons license. So I came up with little systems and borrowed other people's systems to make it more like what I wanted. So I played around with not using modifiers. Instead of the 3 to 18 ability scores, you just use a straight up modifier instead of the modifier itself. So you just have a stat instead of having 13, you just have a +1. And you
Right.
don't think about it. Just stuff like that. Like, tried to minimize it. And to that end, the OSR scene has it's rulings not rule kind of philosophy, and a very hack it together, do it yourself mentality behind it. So it just became really easy to shift from hacking some open source games into, here is a playing space with no concrete singular game. Yes, Old School Essentials is really popular in the OSR scene, but so is the GLOG. I mean, there are like a million GLOG hacks now, and they refuse to even
Trillion.
acknowledge. Yeah, but that thing about them is they refuse to say which is the GLOG. That's what makes them amazing. I love those guys. Their mentality is like, no, there is no one true GLOG. Whatever you have at your house, that's the GLOG. And that to me was really appealing. I didn't do much glog hacking, although there is a glog hack for Cairn that I'm super proud of that's on the website. But it's just the magic system, which is their greatest innovation. You guys should look into it if you don't know it.
I don't know it. I will look at it.
Oh, the glog magic system is so brilliant. It's so
Does
brilliant.
it get rid of spell slots or spell points, which is always what I try to get rid of?
No, it's you basically get a certain amount of magic dice, and you can invest a certain amount into a spell to increase its power. But the more you invest, the more likelihood you might have a mishap. And so they have these mishap tables. It's really awesome. Mouse Ritter uses it, if you're familiar with that.
Okay, I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance to read it. I actually do something similar in my game with kind of people using sort of dice pools to do stuff.
So yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's a dice pool system, but it changes how spells are written, and you get a lot of flavorful, interesting spells. It's a really cool system. But yeah, to answer your original question, I started with One Shot World, but I did a bunch of unpublished stuff before that, and then I also started making just like small dungeons for different systems that I liked. I think the best known one I made is Positronic Library, which is a dungeon for Electric Bastion Land, which is my all-time favorite RPG, which is itself just Into the Odd, but with some changes to it, particularly around the setting. So I guess my intro to the scene would have been probably Knave, followed by Maze Rats, followed by Into the Odd. It kind of went like that, and those are all very quote unquote rules light systems. I mean, I played around with like when basic what they call it, what was OSC before it was OSC? Essentials, BX Essentials, whatever he called it.
Yeah, right.
Whatever Gavin Norman called it. So I had like every version of BX Essentials before that, and then when it became OSC, I just still had some issues with. I agreed with the overall philosophy, but for me there was too much crunching. And then when I found Into the Odd, which removed 2 hit rolls, that was just kind of a mind blown situation. And then I realized, oh yes, Chris McDowell, that's the philosopher king that I follow now. So yeah, that was the journey, is from more classic traditional old school games to what you'd call the new kids on the block.
Yeah, I feel like OSR needs some new naming, because it's impossible. And I find all the time, whenever I start talking about OSR, I have to kind of explain. When I'm talking about OSR, my baseline is this, versus, because there's a big whole spectrum. We've seen something like BX, Into the Odd, and then not even including, if you include stuff, AD&D being even way crunchier. Not even totally not rules light anymore, but OSR by just because it's one of the OGs, right?
Yeah, and I think if you
really
like OSR itself, like all labels, it's only as good as it is useful to the individual. I'm highly inclusive, so to me, I'm not. If someone says they're OSR or their product is OSR, then it's OSR. I am not a person who tries to gatekeep. I think the term, I don't typically describe my own games as OSR, but I don't really describe them as anything. Other than
I was gonna say, I don't think you put in. And my background removal is going to remove this probably as soon as I bring in the camera. But I was just looking like, I don't think you.
But if you look at who the influences are in like the thanks section, they're all OSR people. So it's like Gavin Norman is in there, and
I'm definitely not someone who's going to argue with what is OSR or not. Yeah. The only issue I have with it is just that it's become such a broad term.
Right. It
makes nice it when you could say it makes it harder, because you can't say, oh, I like OSR. It's kind of like, well, that's not enough. I have to then say. No, it's true. Well, what flavor of OSR?
Yeah, do you like OS Rick? Do you like DCC? Is DCC OSR? Well, in some ways, but in other ways, not.
Right.
You have,
and then it just becomes kind of useless. Where I could have just said I like BX related games, and that's someone. But assuming they know what BX is, they might go, "Oh, okay, now I get what you're coming from." Or I like OSC.
Might not even use, like, for example, Into the Odd has 3 stats, and those stats sort of mirror some of the old school stats. But then there's this whole thing with HP as an abstraction that makes it totally different than what it was in older games. So even that, I think, it's interesting. I think the term OSR has become so many things, aside from a brand, aside from a loose-knit community, aside from whatever, that I honestly stopped using it. My domain is newschoolrevolution.com, and that's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing of like, I liked OSR stuff, but I didn't want to feel constrained by that. And I didn't come up with the NSR term, I think I definitely popularized it because I just happened to stake a claim around it. But originally, there's a post on Bonebox Chant, which is a semi-OSR blog, pretty popular around Kickstarter times. You can find some really good posts on there talking about various OSR zines on Kickstarter for the last couple of years. But Bonebox Chant had a post called "What is the NSR?" and it was a really tiny post, and it basically just said like a weird setting, a GM, high lethality, and I don't remember if problem solving is listed there, but I remember it really struck a chord with me, and I decided, oh yes, so what I want is I like OSR modules and I like OSR systems and I'll play them occasionally, but what I really like is my own stuff, which is pretty much OSR, but with some changes. It murders some sacred cows. None of the ideas that I have are original. They're all stolen from much more clever minds, but that's what I like. And so that's sort of my approach to this. Is I try to be very welcoming. I agree with you that the label can be frustrating.
Yeah, people spend as much time discussing just the label as they do discussing the games. But in some ways, like, you know what, if it's not going to be that much, then maybe we could kind of cut it up. But let's get into Cairn. So you went classless.
I borrowed it from Knave, but yes, I did choose it.
So that was one of your names. So what do you like about the that version? Because that's another kind of big thing, right? Classless versus, or depending on how you like your classes, like racist class versus race split from class.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, a lot of these things are abstractions. So a class depending on, if you're talking about older systems and even not so old systems, a class is a collection of skills and possible advancement trees. And there's some assumptions around what those classes can and can't do. I didn't want players to feel constrained by that unless they chose to. So for instance, if you really do want to be a magic user, like the class magic user, there's a optional starter package in the Cairn book. It's like page 13 or something. And you can you can start with 2 spell books and a staff and a robe with funky pockets and a dagger. And you can play that character exactly as you like. With their same limitations, if you like. You can add the background magician to it, and then there's some assumptions around what you can and can't do. I didn't feel like classes and having that kind of arbitrary limitation assisted the mode of play that I prefer. So to be clear, as a designer, I see constraints as a positive thing most of the time. I see adding classes as another constraint, so that's not a bad thing. But I didn't see it as helping to engender the kinds of play that I prefer. Like, I didn't see it helping me create a situation that players would then be able to use critical thinking and problem solving to get around fictional obstacles.
So what were you finding in your experience? Were you finding that players were trying to lean too heavily into I'm the fighter, so I have to do fightery things, and I don't want to engage?
Yeah. There was self-railroading, which can be fine. Like, oh, I don't know that. But then there was also this kind of there was these assumptions about what you can and can't do in a game. And for instance, I can give you my moment of kind of realization. Was I was playing a Knave game, and there was a character that had gone through a number of changes throughout this campaign. And Knave is actually really great for campaigns. People think that it's not because it's classless, but it's not levelless. It does allow for good long extended play. And this guy who had been playing this character, he just felt like his character, as he experienced stuff in the world, would more lean towards magic user later. And so he liked that he could just swap out the stuff he had in his inventory for the stuff that a magic user had by going and buying the stuff and uncovering it as he went, etc. And his character could not have really done that in a traditional system outside of like some minor multi-classing and stuff. If he had been a fighter and then later decided to become a magic user because that's what happened throughout the fictional story or campaign, that just wouldn't have been as possible with other systems. This system is like, look, if you want to play constrained in such a way where your character can only ever do these things, that's fine. But I would rather the difficulty levels be applied to all players in a campaign and not just like, oh, well, you're the wizard, you could never do that. Like, I'd rather have it be oh, your specific background that we have created throughout the process of play, that limits you from doing this, but it doesn't come from some piece of paper that says what you can and can't do. Again, this is not a knock against classes. I just didn't find them helpful in engendering the kind of play experience that I preferred. I like problem solving to be 100% player skill, and I don't see classes as helping with that as much. I can see arguments for it in some cases, but generally speaking, to me, I don't find it helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because when you look at, the very basic, say, BX, whatever classes, there are very few. It's not, so I think it's something like 3rd edition and obviously 5th edition, in which you have classes are not only just your special abilities, but they're also the bundles of knowledge and what skills you're good at, whatever. I haven't found so much, again, just with the people I'm playing with, that they felt bounded in the fiction by the fact that they're a fighter, because when we're playing something like BX, where fighter just means you're good at hitting stuff, or maybe you're the best good at hitting stuff, that just because you don't have any skills attached to it, because look at your list going, oh well, I'm good at this, that when you get outside of combat, presuming that somebody else isn't always stepping in front to handle it, or they're not making the claim of, well, I'm the bard, so I should be talking to whatever.
Well, that is totally the thing I've seen, by the way. I've seen that.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I think I'm sure everyone has seen that. Like, I'm the party face, I should be getting up there.
Yeah.
That they tend to kind of fill in. But I also think that depending on, and especially different people, I think maybe coming from the modern game, they have more maybe ingrained images of what it means to be just in their mind, kind of what it is to be the fighter. I've got to be the, whatever. I do appreciate that one of the weaknesses of kind of the BX style is that it's without hacking into it, right? You don't have a way of taking a fighter and saying like, oh, it's fighter, and then he's going to grow into being a paladin down the line. I mean, you can hack it, you can make it happen, but the mechanisms aren't
It's not an
player
assumption.
facing.
Yeah, it's not like
it's not an assumption. It's not there. Like, I do feel there's something to having it in the book, when a player can look at the book and say, oh, I'm a fighter, I can equip myself with a sword. If I want to start being a magic user, I just need to go find a wand, and I can start doing that. Like, that is a powerful idea to them. And though me playing, I can say that's possible, we have to have that conversation.
No, you can't.
And if you don't know that possibility that's there, you're not going to have it. Whereas something like, I think it's very powerful to put it. That's why I really like with particularly OSR games, and not necessarily AD&D, because they put things in these massive books, but having so that everybody can read everything. Like, all the players can come in. Like, I told my players, like, see all this stuff about how often random encounters might come up and how easy it is to get lost. This stuff is facing to you. Read it, understand it, so that when you end up saying, we're going to go into the hex that's full of hills, you can see right there, oh, hills have a higher chance of getting lost. Hills have a higher chance of seeing things we don't want to see. You can make informed decisions. And the same thing, like what you're saying with the character things, is you can make informed decisions that you may not feel are there, especially if you're newer and you don't know to ask, or you don't know to go to a GM and say, hey, this is what I want to do. It's very easy to fall into it and go, oh, I'm just this, and I guess this is just what I'll do.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I put player principles kind of first thing, like when you open up Cairn, the first thing is, what kind of game is this? And look, like, you do whatever the hell you want, but the idea behind it was, this is how I run games, and here's a mechanized version. I mean, it's not even mechanized, it's stated. The assumptions of players stated. For instance,
I appreciated that a lot, by the way.
Well, like, one of the things was players working together. I've played great campaigns and sessions where whatever an evil character will turn against the group later, and that's fine. I enjoy games when it's a kind of collaborative effort, and so I put into the Cairn booklet, I put in what was the heading called? Let me grab one so I can know what.
One right here.
It's that I put in on the very first. Here it is, right here. Shared objectives.
Right? Yep.
And that was an important part of the experience for me. It's like, if I'm going to run, I don't know, a module where you're all going up against some undead Lich King or something, that you're working together, and it's not just this weird, like, oh, this character might turn against us. That does not interest me that much. So for me, that specific design philosophy was really important. And then just as much as telling, here's what the guy running the game, and here's what the players should be doing. Oh, I see. I skipped it. Excuse me. There, you can see principles for players and principles for the war.
Yep. No, I thought those were really good. I wish more books and things would do that, because it is helpful. One, I think it shows that the person who's designing it has thought about that. Because sometimes I feel like people don't. Like, this is a great idea to put out there. Like I see it all the time. People ask questions, and they're like, "Well, what if I did this, that, and the other?" And usually, my first question is, "What's your actual goal? Like, what is the problem that you're trying to achieve?" And then we could look at, is this house rule, whatever it is, hack, is that actually going to do
what you want to do?
What you want it to do, or are you just kind of throwing stuff out there and you don't have a great sense of what it is? So, like, when I read this on the stream, my first thing was like, this is great that's here, and it's great that you were aware of these are things I'm trying to accomplish. So therefore, I should be able to read forward in the book and come back and say, okay, the things that are in this book are going to be trying to fulfill these things. Like, I know what your guiding star is. I know that if I'm not sure about how something's going to go, but one way it's going to go, it could be one that's going to follow these principles, and the other way is going to go against these principles. I probably should go with the one option is going to follow.
Well, I mean, you should at least understand it. You can change whatever you want, and I hope people do. And in fact, there are plenty of hacks of this thing now, including ones that add levels and classes. It's just no, and I think that's great. It just wasn't my preferred mode of play, although I definitely have stolen from those for other things that I've done. To go back to something you said earlier about how, yeah, in like second edition or whatever, you're not as forced into class-based play as you are later, and people aren't prohibited from like changing classes later, but there's an underlying assumption. One thing I wanted to note was the same sort of limitation that you can apply to an individual, or not even limitation, but advantage that you can apply to an individual character based on their background and class. My argument is that you don't actually need a class to do that, that you can apply fictional, or I should say narrative, advantages and disadvantages without the need for like an underlying rule structure to apply that. So for example, there's no advantage or disadvantage rolls in Cairn. There's no roll 3d6 and keep the top two or whatever, or 2d6 in the case of making a save. There is nothing like that. I think that's fine. I understand those mechanics, and I've used them in every other system I've ever played. But the reason I went whole hog on no advantage or disadvantage mechanics is because my belief essentially is that all storytelling, and role-playing games are storytelling, no matter what we want to say, we are telling a shared narrative. All storytelling is just problem solving, right? It's just like, these are the events that occurred and the problems that these people we care about faced, and this is how they overcame them. There's an element of strong problem solving in all forms of storytelling. And otherwise it's boring, right? Nothing is happening. There has to be some and
right. There's no plot if there's no problems.
Yes, that's a great line. I felt like I could apply advantage and disadvantage in any way I wanted to with GM fiat, right? Like, if you present a situation where the players are super disadvantaged, let's say you've got a fighter type character and a magic user type character, and they're both standing on a muddy hill, and it's nighttime and they can't see very well, and something above them is hurling rocks at them. I don't need to apply dice rolls to let you know that those PCs are at a major disadvantage in a combat scenario. I just don't need to. You get it. They might say, oh, we try to climb up the rock face while the rocks are coming down upon us. I don't need to say, well, roll dice to see if you succeed, and here's the modifiers to make it so that it's harder. I don't need to. I can just say, yeah, you probably can't do that. Or I can say, you can do it. Here's what you have to risk, and I will apply as much damage as possible if you fail based on the realities of the situation. And I would make a further argument that exact calculus occurs in every system, regardless of whether you have super complicated mechanics around advantage and disadvantage. People are always factoring in the results based on an interpretation of what's happening in the narrative. Some dice rolls, you let them fall, the person is dead, that's it. Yes. But for most things that happen in a game, I feel like the GM is ultimately just arbitrarily deciding based on what makes sense in the fiction. And so I just decided to lean in on that, like, hard. And I'm only kind of spinning the conversation that direction because you said, what made you decide not to do classes? And it's the same thing that made me decide not to do levels. I didn't feel like these extraneous rules being applied to the framework of the game made a difference. I mean, there is a difference for people who enjoy the metagaming aspects of that, like character builds and min-maxing, and that's great. I have no problem with that, but it doesn't make it enjoyable to me. So that's sorry, I just talked a long time.
No. That's I mean, it's all. I mean, look, I'm all about the conversation going wherever it wants to go, and that's definitely fascinating stuff. I was just thinking about kind of what you're saying. I mean, ultimately, and we find that it's definitely in BX. I remember there's the back of the at least the basic book, which goes through all different ways you can arbitrate a problem, and one of them is hey, you come up with what percentage chance you think they have. I think they have something where the guy's like, I want to jump across this bottomless chasm, essentially. And you look at it and you go, nothing's fitting. So you go, I don't know, you got to. And then, I think their example with that is the GM says, well, you got a 10% chance.
Right.
I think. Right. And if you fail, you're going to fall into the pit and die. You're just going to, however deep it is, you're going to smack the bottom, you're dead. 10% chance to go. So you're just going to roll a percent out. And if you get, under, 90 or above, you make it. If you're not, you splat. And that's kind of it.
Right.
So there, and even in games, say you go to the D20 system where you get DCs and everything, right? The GM is setting. There are guidelines. Okay, this is easy. This is moderate. This is difficult. But who's deciding what's easy, moderate, difficult? The GM, and then within that, if you want to pick a different number, that the GM is doing. So I guess the only thing I would say, and this is not to say something that anyone has an answer to, is I think, and I kind of feel like with 5th edition. This is a thing that this kind of how much fiat is involved versus how much you're supposed to be looking into the book to I'll just say quote unquote kind of neutral answer, right? Because I think in the OSR space, people are more or less comfortable with the GM more or less saying kind of like what you're saying, like, well, this is what's going to happen. Do you still want to do that, or do you want to figure out another way, right? Versus the book says it's difficult, so that's DC 20, and then I would
argue that DMG the 5th edition is actually really bad at that. But no, dude, I bought the DMG, super excited, and there's like zero guidance for dungeon design. I just have a lot of thoughts about it, but you're right that there's more of an implied video gamey aspect of it. And if I'm a dungeon master for 5th edition. Right? Or let's take a dungeon master who's run only 5th edition and she knows how to figure out DC for difficulty challenge. I don't DC ratings. Is it difficulty checks? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's difficulty challenge rating. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Challenge rating. The CR for a monster. Let's say. Oh God, CRs for monsters. Yeah. Let's say I have to figure that out. That little DMG, that 300-page book or whatever, cannot account for the crazy crap that comes up in any game. And so even
they can't. The fact that people, look, that's a whole other separate argument. People will go hating on it because the CR system doesn't account for whatever their party has. Like, well, how could it possibly? No, it's not an oracle. No, it can't possibly know.
Inevitably, you are told to adjudicate, right? You're told to make rulings, not quite on an OSR level, but you are told to make rulings. And I feel like you're totally right that there is a culture in the OSR of the GM decides, the ref decides, whatever. The judge decides, the judge adjudicates. And that is not as clear in the 5th edition universe. But I think experienced 5th edition dungeon masters will eventually just make rulings. And it will be, in my opinion, as arbitrary as, it would be in an old school system.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it's all like I feel like what I strive to try to do, and I assume the other is I try to have it be as much as it can be a conversation with the players. Like I will, like if someone's trying to climb, your example, you've got hill giants on the top of some kind of ridge. They're tossing boulders at you at the party. The party's 50 feet down. And they go, you know what? We're gonna climb up this. We're gonna climb up the face of the ridge to get up at the giants. And as a GM, I'm going, well, the giants now they don't even have to really aim. They could just kind of just drop stuff. So as a GM, I want to go like, okay, let me explain to you the situation as I see it. Player wants to do this. This is what I'm seeing. Okay, you're gonna be climbing up. You're gonna be pretty much stationary. You can't exactly. You're not a Spider-Man. You can't just skitter to side. You're gonna have to very much slowly picking your chances. They're just going to be dropping boulders. So whatever it is, does that sound about right to you? If you have a totally different imagining,
Right.
let me know. Like if you're foreseeing something else, like, oh, I thought there was more overhangs where I could hide or something like that, and I say, well, no, there's maybe a couple, but not, whatever. We come to that understanding, and then finally say, okay, I feel like you've got 15% chance. Whatever that works out to. Does that sound good to you? No, it doesn't. Okay, well, think of another plan, or
No,
let
it
me know.
doesn't.
Like, oh, I got 8 shields. I'm gonna, suspend over my head using whatever. Like, okay, whatever it is. But they become that kind of understanding. So it doesn't. I think sometimes what people get caught up with the sense of the GM is arbitrator, adjudicators, that it happens like behind a wall. Like,
Right.
the
No, it's
GM
a
just
conversation
steps
for
up and
sure.
just says,
Yeah.
no, or like
Right.
1% chance, roll the dice. And,
Right.
the
Well, a
players
good
don't
GM
have
will,
any
yeah.
kind of, but, I feel like it's a dictatorship with an assembly or something, right? Like
But it doesn't
an
work without the players,
enlightened monarchy. Eventually someone's got to make the call, and that's going to be the GM, but you should, as much as possible, integrate everybody else's, feelings, and that helps give you that shared reality. But I totally agree with you. At the end, the bottom line, at the end of the day, especially with situations that you haven't prepped, right? If those giants were a wandering monster check,
Right.
you didn't have time to calculate whatever it was supposed to be.
Right.
It's just like, well, they're here now, and this is what's happening. So I just have to figure out, with all these different variables in the fiction, about how difficult I think it is to do this or that,
Right.
or the other thing, right?
Or is it interesting?
Yeah.
It might not be interesting. Maybe it being impossible for them to do is interesting. If they get to an ocean and they don't have a boat, but they need to get to an island, you're not going to say, well, you could swim, but you're not going to make it. You might create other situations where they um, follow a thread of clues you leave to find a different way to that island. Like sometimes problems aren't there to be solved, but to help the players engage with the shared narrative so that they can come up with those problem-solving solutions that I so deeply want to, want in my
Absolutely.
game.
But I mean, there's a trick there, right? Because I've seen the other thing happen too, where the party comes to the ocean and the GM thinks that the solution is actually to swim across it, because that the players don't know that, like, just on the other side of the horizon is the island they've been seeking, but the
Right,
players
right,
can't see it. So I've had
right.
that where, like, I was playing in a game, great game, and it was this thing where, like, we went, and for some reason we had to go visit the king. Like, we were in the king's court, and then, like, the city, the city's invaded, right? But we're in with the king, and the king asks us, will you, like, fight to defend the city? And we're like, okay. And, I think afterwards he felt like, well, you guys didn't feel like that enthused with fighting the city. I'm like, well, I'm a astronomer. Like, this other guy is like a dirt farmer.
Maybe
Like,
you should have said no.
we're not fighting. And that's what he said. Like, well, you should say no. I said, but it's the king. Like, I don't feel like
Right,
you go over to the king and the
right,
king says,
right,
will you defend the
right.
city? We could just
Yeah.
go, nah, we're going to
Totally.
go
Yeah.
home. It's like,
Honestly, though, yeah, I like when that stuff happens, when they ruin your plans. This is the best part. It's like when you're scrambling. Yeah.
But we didn't feel like we could. We didn't feel like we had a real choice.
Right.
Like, you're in
Right.
there with all the guards and
Right.
everything, and
Right.
you're kneeling before the king, and the king says,
Right.
will you do this for me? It's like,
Yeah.
we're not empowered to say, fictionally, we're like,
Right.
you
No,
feel
no,
like it's
and
like
to
the
be honest, that's a failure on the
mafia
GM's part.
boss.
It's like if someone's putting a situation in front of the players where they don't feel like they have choice, then they've failed. Like I've done that myself. And I think this goes back again to like the same idea of what kind of play experience you want to have. There's a blog post, a really famous blog post by Chris McDowell on bashland.com. He made Into the Odd, and one of his famous blog posts is called the ICI Doctrine: Information, Choice, Impact. His approach, and it's very much one that I now subscribe to. Essentially, his belief is that you should provide ultimate information to the players, right? Like, you don't necessarily tell them what's behind the secret door. You give them all the information that they need if they're paying attention to not only have an idea of the level of danger of what's behind the door or how it affects them, but also to solve it. You give them the information that they need so that they can feel like they can make informed choices with the kinds of impacts that they would need in order to, not die. And I really tried to emphasize that in Cairn, is this idea that you don't really keep secrets from players. There might be a secret door, but there's no secret door check. There's no perception check. You give them the information. So if for instance, you're describing a room in a dungeon and there's a fine white powder on the ground in the corner, you might tell them there's a fine white powder in the corner, and when they go and investigate it, you don't have them roll to see if they know what it is. You might tell them, assuming that they should know what it is, that there are bone shards inside of it, and then you leave it at that. Maybe they figure out that the dust is from people getting smushed or something. You come up with perception-based information that they can determine without special knowledge, without a specific role, so that the players feel like they are making impactful choices by having maximal information. Now, obviously, you're not telling them everything, but you're telling them everything that they could reasonably know and understand about a situation so that they can make informed decisions. Of course, you have to make the actual problems interesting themselves and difficult with multiple solutions and all that stuff, but you don't necessarily keep any of that information private. You try to give the players tools with which they can solve the problems for themselves.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think the idea of hiding things is kind of vastly overrated, and I don't even mean the kind of the secret doors, but just the way that GMs will often want to make things tricky to figure out or make things difficult. Well, they got to go and they got to look in this specific corner, and it's kind of like if you ever played those adventure games from the 90s where you had the pixel hunt across the screen to try to find, oh, here's the one bit.
Clicking. Yeah. Click. Yeah.
Don't force them to do that. Think of them as being someone intelligent. If they're engaging with the room and you put them there and then they follow that hint, oh, the white, now let's go check it out, and they engage with that, then, give it to them. And yeah, it's fine if you want to engage other things, like maybe there's something magical there, which they will only get if they detect magic or something, but you want to keep kind of feeding them, or they may have, I will often, like, especially now, because my party is currently kind of going through these dwarven ruins, and I have a dwarven PC. So I will often say to the dwarven, oh, you understand, you see the hints of dwarven architecture because of your background. You're a dwarf. You notice that stuff. And the other guys, they don't notice it, but you do. And I'm not making him roll on it. I'm making moral intelligence checks. I'll save that for if he's trying to reach for something further. Because those players will try to reach. Oh, if I understand dwarven architecture, can I tell what cracked the stone? And I'm like, from a stone that was cracked 300 years ago, you're going to tell, like, maybe that's an intelligence check, or tell you a little bit more about how you're determining that kind of thing. But for, information, you want to give them as much as they can. Because I think ultimately as a GM, we want the stuff to come out, right? We're not in the information hoarding business. We want to put it out there, but sometimes we're our own worst enemies as far as we want you to know, but then we're going to put all these obstacles in front of you knowing. And what happens? And then they don't find out. And then you go onto your GM forum and say, oh, I'm bummed out that the party didn't look in the corpse of the horse that was on top of this to find the thing that was hidden underneath the thing. And I'm like, well, why would they want to dig out the corpse of a horse? I don't know. I just thought they would because it was there. Like, no,
especially if it's a dangerous world and making decisions can be costly. You want to make the decisions that are costly worthwhile and come from their own player skill.
Absolutely.
Again.
Because if they get burned out on every time they make a decision, it's just horrible things happen.
Just walk around
guess what? They're going to stop.
Right. Then they're not going to do it. You want them to do some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, someone's in the chat. Hey, nothing. Let's see. It's hard to give general advice on how much / little information you give out as a DM. It depends on how good your players are at figuring things out. I think that's true. I guess there's certainly depending on your players. But that's why I always say err on the side of just being generous. Because if you are generous, then the chances are that most, and of course, as you're playing with the table, you'll know. Like when I go back and I play with my friends who I played with for years and years and years, I know that guy over there, John, he's going to have certain tendencies. I know this guy, so I can kind of understand what I kind of may have to give them to get them in, right? But if the more information you give out, the less chance that they're going to miss everything. And that's why I always feel like when people say, oh, like the Alexandrians 3-clue rule, I'm like, 3 clues. How about 13 clues? How about 33 clues? How about the whole room is a giant clue? Sure. I just don't ever think you can err on giving too much. Right. And then let's see. Also says some of my players have played with me for 20 years and figure my secrets out with almost zero info. Yeah, sure, because they obviously it's a two-way street, right? They read you and you read them. So obviously tailor stuff to your game. But I think if you're going out to play with people that you maybe not intimately familiar with and not intimately familiar with, you can't ever give them too much. Right. I mean, that's the whole thing that was interesting with the concept that came out about, hey, just having traps be just open. Like, forget even searching for traps, just have them be there. Right. Because, the more interesting thing about the trap, sure, the gotcha thing is kind of fun. And, oh, gosh, I fell into the trap. but at least as important or interesting is we know it's there, but we still got to get across it. Like
again,
the pit trap is open.
Yeah, it's
you got to get around it now.
It's like the story is interesting when players engage with the fiction, and a good way of doing that is making their characters feel endangered. So making them fairly easy to kill, but only if they make bad decisions, and then giving them all the information they need to make good decisions.
All right, I Zarop Patos.
Hi,
so please tell me if I got
know who that is. I know who that is.
Oh, you know who that is.
You're not playing it wrong. Just message me later. Jesus.
Yeah, no one. Look, as long as everyone's having fun, no one's doing anything wrong, right? And you just always got to feel like open. I think the only thing as GM is you got to be open to that maybe you're doing something wrong, and that's assuming that you're doing something around the table and your players are disengaging or they're all frowning at you,
exactly,
or something's gone right. Read the room. And if the room's looking like, oh, maybe I made a misstep, then be open enough to be like, I might have made a misstep, as opposed to everybody else did something wrong or no, right? Think about, okay, maybe I did something. But, look, I get rules wrong all the time. I can't remember additions from additions. I'm totally checking and rechecking. And I'm always asking people, hey, does this sound right? Did we do this way last week? Because I forgot to take a note about it. So, I might be even doing it differently. Like there's no wrong. As long as everybody wants to play next week and everyone's happy to come to the table and sit down,
you're doing it right.
There's no wrong. You're doing it right. Yeah, that's it. As long as people are coming back, you are doing it right. All right. I'm trying to think about it. So I really think the stuff is interesting about how players kind of engage or getting players to engage with the fiction, because I think that's something that a lot of folks, it's a big issue that people have, I think. And I'm not sure. And it's one of those things too that it's nice to come up with some pithy advice like you can give for something like, oh, just do it. But it's one of those things that's really, really tough. I feel like having run a bunch of one shots where you have to kind of get people into the fiction and kind of fast.
Well, I cheat, and I'll tell you why.
All right. Give me the. Okay, all right. What's the cheat?
There's two ways. Okay. One way is a time sink and doesn't work with every kind of player. The other way is much faster, but in my opinion, reaps less rewards. So
all right.
If you go to newschoolrevolution.com, which is my website, there is a post called Build Your World on there. It details a collaborative world building method that I utilize. That is not, it's not really what people think. It's not let your players add to the fiction. I mean, it is that, but it's only that for a kind of session 0 portion. And I've done this with OSR games as well. Essentially what you do is go through a process where you build a map and a setting together that's entirely unique, and you do it on the fly. I would do this in about 45 minutes for a 3 to 4 hour session. And I did this every single Saturday. So I got pretty good at doing this and knowing what questions to ask. It does not work for every kind of player, especially those who are not comfortable kind of giving setting information like from within themselves. And again, this is not something that you do after the game starts necessarily. This is just something you do before it starts. What it does do, if you do it, I'm not going to say correctly, but the way that I describe, in my experience, is it gets people super involved in the setting, regardless of who their characters are. So what they can do is create a world collaboratively, and then that world is important to them by the end because they've been involved in making it. I will start by saying, what kind of magic system does this world have? Is it from the gods? Does it only come from ancient artifacts that people uncover and no one really understands it? Like what kind of magic system, etc. And then I ask other questions like, what is a unique property about this world that everyone is trying to get after? Is it like spice on Dune? Is it magic stuff, whatever it is? And I'll ask these kind of targeted questions. And by the end, we've built a map or a bunch of index cards or hex cards, if you're being really fancy, that kind of describes a setting with a lot of blinks. And we don't even need to use that map after that. But what it does do is establish the kind of world and shared framework that we're going to play in. Obviously, you're not going to do this when you're running old school modules, which is something that I do a lot these days. But initially, it really was helpful to get player investment in a setting.
So in terms of your one shot, was your one shot flexible that you could, whatever they came up with in those setting things, you could just flip it around?
Oh yeah. I will say one of the strengths of PBTA games is that they really don't. You can't write modules for them, not really, because of the way that the dice mechanics work. The resolution system is just too impossible to predict. Things could go one of three ways instead of just binary. And I know that that's true in certain terms with other games, but it really makes it hard to write modules for PBTA games, which is why I kind of stop running them. One of the main reasons is because there's amazing modules out there that I can never run because I'm using Dungeon World or whatever, or World of Dungeons is what I got more into later. But it does allow you to ask questions and use the answers. It's actually in the the GM principles, is to kind of rely on the players, even their non-setting answers, like how would this work, that kind of stuff, that really lets you just mine their brains for fun stuff to do. And you also start the players en media res, so you're the start of the game is you just uncovered the ancient tomb, and you turn around and then a rival adventuring party is pointing arrows at you. What do? You kind of force people to start playing. And I don't really do that anymore, but it did help with this kind of process. So that's the one way that I have used in both OSR games as well as PBTA games to kind of get people invested in the setting. The other way is to do character creation as quickly as possible, which both Into the Odd, Knave, and Cairn and Maze Rats, all those games do that. They make character creation really, really fast. So if someone does die, it's not a huge time crunch. They just bring someone else into the world. And then what you do is you create situations that both endanger their lives, but also interest them. So like, that sounds very pithy as you say, but it's like, I like when the players are not trying to solve huge world breaking problems. I like it to be, you don't have any money, you have shared debt, and the person that is calling in for that debt is the super powerful person or group, and you need to either do what they ask you to do in exchange for your debt being released, or you need to go get a bunch of money as quickly as possible. I really like those kind of directions when it comes to building a game from scratch. So if I'm running a Cairn setting from scratch, I might say, okay, you're both on the run. You had these negative things happen to you all collectively, and these are the groups that are looking for you. Oh, and you're trying to resolve your problems by finding some ancient artifact and selling it. Oh, but by the way, once you get that artifact, it makes you a target. So and that's actually, Into the Odd does that really well, where you might randomly start with an Arcana, which is just a magic item, and the Arcana might be like just too powerful for you, and you don't even have to roll to use it. But if you do use it, it's like the Eye of Sauron. Everyone's gonna know about it. And so that kind of idea really works well. So fast character creation, a shared debt, which is not present in Cairn, but it is present in Electric Fashion Land, which is why I strongly recommend that game. I actually have a hack of Cairn that I've been working on that does create an Electric Fashion Land style background character creation process that does use shared debt in order to get players to all be connected somehow and also have to do something. So you might, the thieving guild might believe you owe them money. Doesn't even matter if you're a thief. They might think you owe them money, and that can give the GM or warden a good excuse to confront the players early on with a specific problem that if they don't resolve, the debt's going to get called in. Or maybe this is their way of resolving that debt. Maybe they can say like, you need to pay the thieving guild back X amount of gold pieces, and you have a hot tip about something that might just do just that. So that's the kind of way I do it with
I think that's all really good. I think what I like about the I actually have done, not really as a as a concept, but I've done the shared debt thing, which works. Which I think it just worked pretty well. The other thing I like, and I think your examples kind of bear out, is that they're basically open ended, right? Is that because one of the things I find is there's kind of two vectors that may or may not be closely aligned. And one of them being what the player says their character's goals or whatever they feel like their character wants to do. And the other one's actually what the player wants to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they can be in tight, sometimes not so much. So being able to say, hey, you owe, because I think what the mistake sometimes that GM will make was they'll say, okay, you owe the thieving guild money, and I'm going to do in medias res. So I'm going to say that you guys are now in gladiatorial combat to do this. And so you think like, oh, this is in media res. This is great. They do this. But maybe your players like they get to the table and like, I didn't want to do gladiator.
Right. You don't give them
like
a
I
choice
wanted to explore the wilderness. I wanted to go find a ruin, or I wanted to climb that tower. But you've taken all that away. But you're thinking like, oh, this is great. I'm in Mias Res. Like, yeah, but now you forced them down this one avenue.
Which is why I don't do that as much anymore, honestly.
But if you say like, I'm in the town and I owe the Thieving Guild money, there are gladiator games happening over there, but there's also this thing happening over there. This thing's happening over there. Suddenly there's that impetus, but now the party can get together and say, well, as players, what do we want to do? As characters, what do we want to do? And we can figure that out and say, okay, there's enough variety on the landscape that we can find that thing. Because I found that a lot, that a GM thinking they're giving you this in media res jump, but it'll end up feeling more like that kind of railroad kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like you're totally
agree.
You're just pushed into this one circumstance. But yours doesn't do that. But I think it's always good to give them an impetus. You have to have some reason, because like people say, well, what? Well, they got too much money. How are they going to get them out of town? Well, yeah, but that's where complications. Like if
maybe
you
them having too much money. Maybe that's a problem.
A fool and their money will soon be parted. Like what's happening? Like where are all the people coming in?
You don't like when you. I feel like every word attached to a character is a useful jumping off point. So like during character generation, and this is one of the reasons why I use Knave as a base for part of the character generation, is that there are these character traits. Okay. And you might start out with a character that's both gregarious and deceitful, and has a reputation for being wise, but has the misfortune of being blackmailed. And sometimes I've had games start where two characters happen to get blackmailed, and then I'm like, okay, what did you guys do? And that there is an actual conversation there that is somewhat collaborative about how did you guys both get those traits? Now, if someone doesn't want to come up with it, I can say, fine, we'll figure it out later. It's your secret past or whatever. But I do find the Knave style character generation, which is actually in Knave, it's even better than it is in Cairn, because I actually cut all those tables in half. But in Knave, it really pushes you to make use of all these various tags. Like, oh, I had a game once where one guy was a portly cleric style person with a cleric background, whatever, who started out with a single spell book beast form, and the other player, his character was a tall, lanky, older warrior who had no teeth or something, and they just worked so well together. Like these two completely randomly generated characters worked so well together, and I just from their background and traits, I was able to come up with a good excuse for why they would be going into this super dangerous place. So yeah, the third thing I would say is to use the traits that the random character.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, that's why I like about the random stuff, is I get that certainly it seems like modern 5th edition type gamers, they love to be crafting their character from 1 to 20, and they have this very specific thing they're trying to build. But for me, like I don't care that much. Like I will run out of steam way before I've built up this thing. Like people will ask my character, like, what's your character? I think like the last time I was a player, someone was like, oh, yeah, what's your backstory? What's your character's backstory? I'm like, I don't know. He was on a walking tour and he ran out of money, so now he's in the nearest town, like looking for work. I mean, that, like I don't know, because like that to me is not really important. Like I'm not looking to be like, well, really, I'm the secret god king's son, but I lost my memory, and like no, I'm like, I don't know. He's just some dude. He's some dude. So for me, rolling on the tables is going to give me things that I would not choose for myself. And I know a lot, like everyone has those jokes about how often are you playing the same character, or are you playing just in a kind of like slightly different wrapping. But when you use those tables and you just embrace it, which I think is another kind of OSR thing, which is why I like the 3d6 down the line as opposed to all the finagling, is just, hey, embrace who you got. So your guy is, he's clumsy, he's not that bright, and he's probably going to die because he's only got 2 hit points. But you know what? See what you can do with that guy.
Right. And in fact, people roll. I ran a game for this woman a few months ago, and she rolled a guy who had like 16 will, which is like super powerful, but she had 1 HP. And so I said, okay, this is what we're working with. You have 2 spell books. You rolled 2 spell books or something, and you have 16 will. So clearly you're like a wizard who's never been in a fight. Like that's so and I think those limitations are great.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that sometimes I find that those last the longest. I've played in groups where the guy with the weakest stats lived the longest because the guy with the strong
So
stats, maybe they thought they were a little bit better than
right,
they were,
right.
whatever. But they're the ones that get all hacked to bits. Whereas that one hit point, the one that's willing to go get some hirelings and put them in front, be like, you know what, I'm going to stand 20 foot back, or maybe I'll try talking to them because I've got great intelligence, so I speak like 8 languages. So like, let me speak Goblin and try to get out in front
Right,
of this so that they don't. Because
right.
if they hit me with a pebble, I'm dying. So, I'm going to try hard not to get hit. I think that stuff is great. Well, we're at an hour, and I don't want to keep you because I know it's in the middle of a workday. I would love if you can come back because I feel like we didn't even, only the surface has been scratched.
I
So maybe we
agree.
can, if you're willing, we'll come back on and we can chat. Do you have any links you want to share? I could post them in the show notes. I already posted in the chat the link to your blog and also that link to your. I think your post is called "Build Your World," right?
Yeah, Build Your World is the collab world gen, and I've got examples there and stuff. Again, it's not for everybody, but I really do like it. Um, the main link I would suggest you put down is for the Cairn RPG website, which is
Yep, I've got that in the show
cairnrpg.com.
description. Yep,
Yeah, and I think
already.
one thing I would say is that I just have a lot of stuff there, and I'm constantly adding. I mean, the reason I designed Cairn honestly was because I wanted to run old school modules in my preferred way. So I'm constantly putting up conversions for other systems. I just put out a printable version of Winter's Daughter's conversion notes that you can stick in your Winter's Daughter book, which is my all-time favorite module. So being able to just you know, um, carry around Winter's Daughter in my bag with the little Cairn conversion notes that you slide in was hugely
I was about
helpful.
to ask you before we go. What do you have a favorite old school module?
Well, it depends how far back you want to go. My current favorite, in terms of what I run for new players, no matter the system, is Winter's Daughter by Gavin Norman. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I think there are two versions of it, and they're both great, but I really, really like the first
Oh, I see.
version.
There's a 5th edition, and then there's an old school
No,
essentials.
sorry. That's the systems it's for. No, there is
Oh,
they Gavin replaced the introductory problem to be more on theme, and he kind of explains it on his blog. I completely understand where he's coming from, but it loses some of the horror aspects that I really loved about it,
okay.
and that's okay. I think his changes are for the better, but I still prefer the problem solving aspects of the adventure itself when run how it was originally written. The version I have printed is the original version for
Gotcha.
OSC. Anyways, yeah. So with Winter's Daughter, there's a whole bunch of others I like. If you look at what's been converted, like The Waking of Willoughby Hall and such, they're all in the conversion section of the website. And I'm also working on a couple dungeons right now that will come out sometime soon.
All right, awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming. Let's say, hopefully, we can get together soon. If
Yeah.
reach out to me or I'll reach out to you. And if you want to time it around something else coming out, we can do that
Oh,
too.
great idea. Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to work that whole thing. Creators need to get out there and spread the word. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you caught the other chat, and thanks for sending me. It's an awesome book. I really appreciate it. Great, awesome. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I guess that's all I got. Any last things from the chat before we let people get back with their days? I forget if there's a delay or not, so I'll just wait a minute, see if anybody have anything. Maybe not.
If folks have specific questions about Cairn, the NSR Discord has a Cairn category that you can ask them in. There's links to that on the Cairn RPG, or actually on the New
Okay.
School Revolution page. Actually, yeah, the New School Revolution page has links to it. Maybe Cairn RPG, I can't remember. But
Let me see. I just had your New School Revolution, the Discord server. Yep. I'll just copy that link. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. Have you seen the stuff? Have you messed around? Looked at the kind of the new free Kriegspiel?
FKR, yeah,
FKR, yeah.
yeah,
Have you gotten
yeah.
into that? Have you done some things with
I
that?
am very familiar with it. Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's a
Yeah,
whole other thing. So I'll have to
I
remember
mean,
that to keep up with you next time.
yeah, I'm not a representative of it. I know many people who are. There's some tangentials. Like, I would say there are people who like Cairn who do a lot of FKR stuff and would say like, oh, if I'm running something, I'll run into the odd or Cairn or whatever. I like FKR and I will totally run FKR systems. I think it's great. I just like old school modules so much, so it's hard for me to I mean, there's way more conversion if I'm running FKR, and I kind of do the same thing. But yeah, FKR is great. And if you ever are looking for someone to kind of talk about that, I know a few people who are.
All right, yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely. I definitely would, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it or someone else. All right, great. Well, I won't keep you any longer. I'm gonna kill the chat. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it. And all right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, night, weekend, whenever.